Good evening. Like Ann said, my name is Kathy Barth, and I'm a member of St. Mary Parish, downtown Appleton, where Ann is also. My husband Keith and I have been married for almost 34 years and are the parents of 11 children, 6 here on earth and 5 in heaven. We buried our firstborn son when he was just 14 months old and lost 4 other babies to miscarriage. When we moved to Appleton about 2.5 years ago, we left behind our 4 oldest children in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I'm from and where we lived, bringing unwillingly at the time our youngest son, Connor, who graduated last year from Xavier, and our youngest daughter, Kelsey, who is currently a 7th grader at Xavier Middle School. I am up here tonight because I have the privilege of introducing both our topic for this evening and our keynote speakers, who happen to be my sister Chris, my brother-in-law Chris, and my nephew Seth. But first, I have a question for you. I'd like to know how many of you out there in the audience have never, ever experienced suffering in your life. Please raise your hand. That's what I thought. This is a topic that we can all relate to because, frankly, we've all been there. We were told we would have suffering in this world. We were actually told that in order to follow Christ, we must first pick up our cross and then follow him. And regardless of what type of suffering we have or what cross we happen to be carrying at the moment, we need a support group. And we have one here in the body of Christ. When we were having trouble finding a good support group after our son Christopher died, it was my dad who told me that it wasn't important for us to be in a group that shared the particular cross we were carrying, that of losing a child, but rather it was more important to be in a group that shared the answer. Think about that. For it is in our belief in Christ, the one who is walking beside us and helping us to carry that cross, that binds us together. And that's where we find the best support group of all, in the body of Christ, in those who believe in the power of prayer, in those who believe in love and the healing power of our God and Savior. And this was never more true for me than in the story you're about to hear. But first, one more question. How many of you thought that you knew God's will for you in your life, or at least for you in a particular situation in your life, and then found out that God's will and your will were not the same thing? That's actually how we found ourselves here in Appleton. My husband was being recruited by a local company here, and I, trying to be the good and dutiful wife, said, "Let's pray about it." I only said that because in my heart and in my mind, I knew that God was never, ever going to move us here. Away from our children, away from our family, away from our schools, our parish community, and the community that we had worked so hard and lived in for the past 18 years. After all, we were doing good things for the church, for our community. We were trying to live faithful lives. We were raising our children together with my sister and her family who lived 3 blocks away, and my brother and his family who lived 4 blocks away, and my other brother, who we dubbed the black sheep of the family merely because he lived 10 minutes away. So praying for God's will was really easy when I thought I knew what it was. Surprise! God's will wasn't my will, that's for sure. And you'd think I would have learned that one by now. And so we found ourselves starting over, alone in a new town, without our oldest children or our family, with no friends, no parish community to call our own, living in a hotel for over 2.5 months, and then in a rental house that needed a lot of work. I spent those first several months grieving, and I mean, I was trying to get through my days without crying, which I did at least once a day. Now, when Christopher died, I spent my days trying to breathe and get out of bed. So this was a different type of grief, but it was a grief nonetheless. So on February 14th, after about 6 months of being here, we were finally set to sign the papers selling our home in Michigan, which would seal our fate here. And the night before, I got a phone call. I was at the Fox Valley Tennis Club watching my son Connor play tennis when I got the call that my nephew Seth had fallen 25 feet through a roof and was fighting for his life. I prayed 4 rosaries while pacing back and forth in the upper level of the club, but never once did I say, "Your will be done." Instead, my prayers were constantly punctuated with, "No, no, God, please, no, 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 please. Please, no." You will understand that prayer a lot more when you hear my sister's story. Suffice it to say, I couldn't stand the thought of seeing her and Chris at the bedside of yet another of their children, begging God for his or her life. Being the oldest in the family, I'm the protector, a nurturer, a doer, much more Martha than Mary. My sister and I are extremely close, and we've been through a lot together. But now, I found myself in a situation where I was far away, isolated, and couldn't be there for her or her family. And I questioned God. Not only why had he allowed more suffering and tragedy to happen to them, but why had he moved me here to Appleton, where I was powerless to help them, where I could do nothing, where I couldn't take care of them, or make meals, or take care of their children, or even sit in that room with them, holding their hands and supporting them. Why had he moved me here, where all I could do was pray? I repeat, where the only thing I could do to help was pray and ask other people to pray. I'm sure there are some of you in the audience who are in a similar situation right now. And while just praying didn't feel like enough, let me tell you, it was the absolute best and most important thing I could have ever done. And God had moved me exactly where he wanted me to be in order to do exactly what he wanted me to do. Now, Chris and Chris have always been very private people, but on the 3rd day after Seth's accident, they realized they needed to get the word out, that we needed to get more people praying for Seth in his recovery. So they gave me permission to start posting on Facebook. From that day on, I probably spent at least 5 hours a day posting things on social media, emailing prayer groups, texting everyone I knew and people I didn't know, asking, begging them to pray for Seth. I literally wrote hundreds of posts, often 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and night. And those posts were shared by my friends, that were shared by their friends, until it spread, and we literally had thousands and thousands of people from around the world praying for Seth. My sister said it was like an army of prayer warriors being raised up to support them and pray for him. My prayers that I would have done in that room next to them would have never held this kind of weight as the prayers of thousands of people unified, praying for the same thing. And God answered our prayers miraculously in so many ways. Every time there was a specific need, I would post asking for prayers for that need, and the hurdle would be jumped. It was crazy. There are so many miracles that I could tell you about, not only about the power of prayer in Seth's story, but about the miracles that happened in the lives of those who were praying for him. I'm going to share just one of those miracles with you. It was 2 a.m. here in Appleton, which is 3 o'clock Michigan time. I couldn't sleep. I was still up praying for Seth. Seth had had a really bad day. They had been trying to put a trach in order to help his chances of survival, and it was an important step in his recovery. But every time they tried, his ICP numbers, those are the numbers that measure your intracranial pressure in your brain, they would spike. So they had tried numerous times to do this procedure, and each time they had to stop. And Chris and Chrissy were so frustrated and upset. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and God put it on my heart to post something, even though it was the middle of the night, asking for specific prayers for that procedure. And so, figuring that Seth had relatives in California who might still be up, I posted. The next morning, I looked at my post, and there was an amazing comment there from a woman that none of us knew. Her name was Amy Oakley. Amy wrote that at 3 a.m. Michigan time, the exact same time I was posting, she woke up in the middle of the night and asked God who she should pray for. She said she fell back asleep and had a vision of Seth. She saw herself down on her knees in Seth's hospital room, praying for him. But she also saw hundreds and hundreds of other people down on their knees in his hospital room, praying for him. So many so, she said, that they overflowed into several other hospital rooms. And there were so many that in her mind she was thinking, how do they let all these people into the hospital? The next morning she wrote about her experience under my post. Further down in the comments, another woman wrote, oh my gosh, I was in that same room with you last night at the exact same time. Later, we found out that one of our friends had had the exact same experience at the exact same time on the same night. And we've actually since learned that several people woke up that night at that exact time to pray for Seth. And Seth will tell you that it was those prayers, the prayers of some of you who are in this very room, that kept him alive and gave him the strength to keep fighting. And so, to our dear prayer warriors, some of whom I've had the privilege of meeting and now call my dear friends, thank you. Let me assure you, God really does listen to and answer our prayers. Now, his answers, like his will, may not always be what we want them to be. But he never ignores us or forsakes us, and he is always right there beside us. That's one of the first things Seth told me in person when he could talk again. Aunt Kathy, he said so excitedly, but as he'll correct me in a weak voice. God, he's right here. He's right here beside us. And the veil, it's so thin. It's like paper. It's not even like cloth. It's like you can blow on it, and it moves. Seth saw that in person. Seth found out about the power of prayer in person. He will tell you it's more important than you can ever imagine, and it does more than you can ever imagine. Someone at the talk last night asked, what can we do to help someone who is suffering and in pain? And I agree with Mother Mary Catherine, who said, pray. I know firsthand the very first and best answer to that question is that you can pray. It shouldn't be the last thing on our list. It should be the very first thing we do. And don't put it off. Do it right then and there. Because I know we're all busy, and even with the best of intentions, we forget. Who was that I was supposed to pray for, Lord? I know it was someone. Stop and do it right then and there. Place that person who is suffering in the loving arms of our God, our Father, and in the healing arms of his Son, our Lord and Savior, and in the protective mantle of Mary, our Blessed Mother. There is absolutely nothing better that you can do, and no better gift that you can give them. And it's a gift that we can give to each other. It's the most important gift we can give to each other. I know that now. My sister knows this firsthand too. She may be my baby sister, who I have wanted to protect all my life, but she is the strongest and most faith-filled and faithful woman I know. Her example of how to truly live out our Christian vocation, even in the midst of tremendous suffering, has taught me so much. And I love her beyond words and thank God for her every day. And so it is my great honor and privilege to introduce to you my sister, Christine Alfaro.
First of all, I just want to thank Kathy for always being there for me. And as she alluded to, my husband Chris and I have had a bit of suffering before we even got to Seth's accident. So before I get into what happened with Seth, I want to give you a little bit of our background and share with you how God has worked in my life through the suffering. My husband Chris and I, like they said, have been married for 30 years, and together we've had 11 children. And our journey as parents started right away. Just 10 months after our wedding, our first son, Michael Frederick, was born. Michael is now 29 years old. He's married and he has 3 sons. The day before Michael's 2nd birthday, our 2nd son, Trinidad Joseph, was born. Only Trini was stillborn. He was full term, and his autopsy showed that every organ was perfectly developed. The doctors had no idea why Trini had died in the womb. For the sake of time, I can't go into all of my grief tonight, but it's important that you know that it truly was my faith and my family that got me through it. About 6 months later, we were expecting again, and we found out we were having our first little girl, and we named her Nicole Bernadette. Now, Nicole was a VBAC after having had 2 C-sections. So the minute she was born was the most intense joy I had ever felt in one single moment. I remember laying there crying out, "Thank you, Jesus." I was so excited. But my joy quickly turned as Nicole struggled to breathe. Now, the doctors weren't overly concerned because Nicole was born breech. And breech babies often have a little trouble breathing at first. So they allowed my husband, Chris, to carry her to the nursery where they were going to give her some oxygen support. The nurses took this picture of Nicole for us so that we would have something to hold on to while we waited for her. As the time went on, Chris and I started to get kind of nervous. But the nurses, they weren't worried at all. In fact, they told us, well, you know, it's time for us to take you to your room now. So along the way, we'll stop by the nursery. You can see your baby and set your mind at ease. The problem was we didn't stop at the nursery. We stopped instead at the neonatal intensive care unit. And before we could even see Nicole, the doctors approached us and they said, oh, I'm sure you know by now, your daughter is in critical condition. She has one of three things, and if it's the one that we think it is, she will steadily go downhill until she dies. So Chris baptized her immediately, and then we began our vigil at her side, talking to her and singing to her and praying with her and loving her while we could. At 30 hours old, Nicole died. So in 30 hours, I literally went from the height of joy to just the depths of despair. And unlike Trini, her autopsy showed that she had a genetic kidney disease. So that meant that every pregnancy, our babies would have a 25% chance of developing the same fatal kidney disease in the womb. So pregnancy for us from that time on became just this emotional roller coaster of all these hopes and dreams and joy mixed with just incredible fear. We were blessed, though, just a year later with another beautiful daughter, Andrea Elizabeth. And Andrea is now 25 years old. And just a year and a half after Andrea, we had another son, Seth Thomas, and Seth is now 23 years old. When Seth was 2, I was expecting again. And we found out we were having another little boy, and we named him John David. At 28 weeks into my pregnancy, the doctors told us that John David had the same fatal kidney disease as Nicole. They told us that outside of a miracle, there was no hope, and that he would die shortly after birth. Well, I still had 2 months to carry him in my womb. So during those 2 months, we prayed a family rosary on our knees every night. And all day long, every day, I begged and pleaded with God to heal my son. And I read through all the Gospels. I mean, the Gospels are full of miracles. And I highlighted them all, and I listened to talks on healing and miracles. And Chris and I had even contacted the Sisters of Charity. And they and we were all seeking Mother Teresa's intercession for a miracle for John David. I knew that God could heal my son. And I was convinced that he would. It was a great plan. This was going to be a great miracle to attribute toward Mother Teresa's sainthood. And doctors were going to be converted and abortion ended. Like, God couldn't have planned it better himself, right? But on December 26th, the day after Christmas, John David was born with the kidney disease. And our parish priest, Father Jim, he waited outside the delivery room, and he came in and he baptized John David as soon as he was allowed. And then we began our vigil at our son's side, talking to him and singing to him and praying with him and loving him while we could. At 12 hours old, The doctors came to us and they said, these machines are no longer sustaining your son's life. He is dying. So at that point, they unhooked him from the machines, and we held our son for the first and the last time. Father Jim came back to the hospital then, and he prayed the prayers of the dying over John David, and he prayed over my husband, and he prayed over me. But the whole time he prayed, I was still begging God for a miracle. But at only 13 hours old, John David's heart beat for the very last time in the arms of his brother Michael, who was 8, and his sister Andrea, who was almost 4. This time, my grief was very, very different. I felt no comfort from God or my faith at all. I was completely crushed. And for 3 months, I literally felt like I was dying inside. I had a husband and 3 little kids to care for, and I had nothing to give them. I felt empty and dead. I mean, I could still say and do all the right things. I could hold the kids and I could tell them that I loved them, but I literally felt nothing. And I was so scared of what kind of wife and mother I was becoming. But I felt powerless to change it because I didn't know what was happening to me. So one day, a friend of mine suggested, hey Chris, why don't you try just writing a letter to God as your friend and just tell him how you feel. And so I did. And as I started writing, these things that weren't very nice just started pouring out of me, and I was sort of yelling at God, and I just said, Lord, how much must I bear? How long, God, are you just going to continue to stomp on my heart and crush my joy? And why, God? Why did you lead me to believe in a miracle, knowing full well that you were not going to do it? And knowing how crushed I was going to be, how could you do that to me? And as I wrote and these things just poured out of me, I realized for the first time that I was really angry with God. And I knew then that in order to find healing, I had to make up with God. But I didn't want to. I felt like he was the one that just punched me in the gut. So how could I go running to him for comfort? I couldn't. So I couldn't finish the letter. I couldn't sign off on it. And I just held on to it. But after only about 3 days of carrying around what I now knew was this intense anger toward God, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I went into our church and I went into the Eucharistic Adoration Chapel and I knelt down and I just said, Lord, I give this anger to you. I can't do this on my own, God. I need you, and I want you. And as soon as I said that prayer, God's love just came rushing into my heart. It was something I hadn't felt in so long. Now, it didn't take away the pain of having lost John David, but it gave me the grace to walk through it. So after that, I really felt like I needed to go to confession, and I needed to confess this anger that I had held toward God. So I went to Father Jim, and he just looked at me, and he said, oh, Chris, you have not offended God. God understands your pain. However, when we hold on to anger in our hearts, God's love can't get through. We can't receive it. And he went on to describe exactly what had been happening to me over the past 3 months. So after that, I did eventually heal, and I did find joy again, but I always felt like a very wounded and broken woman. And I just thought that's how life was going to be. We were blessed, though, just 1 year later, with another beautiful son, Ethan Pedro. And Ethan is now 20 years old, and he is a sophomore in college. And when Ethan was born, he just brought me so much joy. And at this point, both Chris and I were completely content with our family. We had 4 living children, we were good. Why mess with that, right? The truth was, I was really afraid to mess with that. But we know how God works. He always challenges us to move past our fears because he wants to set us free. And I remember it well. It was a Holy Week just like this. And it seemed like everything we heard that Holy Week, every homily, was about not being afraid to open your hearts to love again. And so we did. And soon after, we conceived another son, and we named him Jacob Francis. Now, during my pregnancy with Jacob, I read a book called Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. And that book literally changed my life. Because it wasn't just about accepting God's will. It was about desiring God's will. It was about having your will so completely conformed to God's that that's all you want, his will. And so throughout the pregnancy, as I read this book, I just kept praying that somehow God would conform my heart and my will to his. Now, during the pregnancy, we also found out that Jacob, too, had the same fatal kidney disease as John David. And just like with John David, we begged and we pleaded with God to heal our son. But the difference this time is that I had to end every prayer like Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. Your will, Lord, not mine, be done. And I realized then that with John David, I never prayed that way. Not even once. I had my will and my plan, and I wanted God to conform to me. So on December 18th, Jacob was born with the kidney disease. Father Jim again came and baptized him right away, and we began our vigil at our son's side, talking to him, singing to him, praying with him, and loving him while we could. I remember one night in particular, just leaning over Jacob's little bed, kind of like in the picture there. And this particular night, I just couldn't stop the tears. And I was literally just bawling, and I was trying to talk to Jacob through the tears. And I was just telling him how much I loved him, and how much I wanted him to stay with me, how much I wanted to just care for him and love him and be his mommy on this earth. And then that talking turned into a prayer, just begging God, please don't take my son again. I'll do anything. I don't care how hard it is. Just please let me mother this little boy on this earth. But even right there, I still had to end the prayer. Your will, Lord, not mine, be done for Jacob. And Jacob died the next morning. This time, though, I wasn't angry. And the funeral, everything was so beautiful. But then, when everything's over and everyone goes back to their normal lives and you're just kind of left there, I felt like God just left me all alone. And so one night I was in our family room and I was all alone and I was just sitting on the couch, and since no one else was in the room, I just started talking out loud to God. And I said, Lord, you asked me to open my heart to love again. And I did. And then, God, you asked me to give my son Jacob back to you. And I did. But now, God, where are you? I feel like you've left me all alone here. And as soon as I spoke those words, in my heart, I felt God say to me, oh, no, Chris, no. I am right here. And I have a beautiful plan for you right now, right in the middle of your pain and your grief. And let me tell you, he did. For about the next 2 weeks, God allowed me a spiritual, supernatural experience in which I had this deep, deep inner joy and peace like nothing I had ever felt before, right in the middle of my grief. I can only describe it by using Philippians 4:7, where it talks about the peace of God which surpasses all understanding. That is exactly what God gave me. And during that time, I felt so privileged to be Jacob's mother and John David's and Trini's and Nicole's, and to be a part of God's most perfect and beautiful plan for their lives. Humanly, it made no sense. I had just buried my 4th child, and yet everything was beautiful and perfect, exactly as it was. It was so real that I actually wrote in my journal that holding Jacob alive in my arms would not bring me more joy. And through that experience, God brought me complete healing from all of their deaths. I am no longer wounded and broken because of them. And I knew then that God had given me just a glimpse of heaven. And he showed me beyond a doubt that his will is perfect, even when I can't understand it, and even when it hurts. We were blessed to go on from there and have 3 healthy living children in a row. We have Caleb, who is now 16, Mary Kate, who is 15, and Peter, who is 11. And I was so blessed to become a busy mom of 7 kids. So all this time, since having lost Jacob, I have wanted to write a book to share my experiences. But I was a busy mom of 7 kids, and so it got put off. until about 3 years ago, when I was listening to a homily online, and the title of the homily was "Do It Now." And as you can imagine, the gist of the homily was, if there's something you feel like you're supposed to be doing and you've been putting it off, do it now. And so I did. I wrote the book. It took me about a year. And why is this book important? Because as much as God had taught me, I am very, very human, forgetful, and very prone to worry. Just ask my family. And so I had forgotten a lot of what God had taught me. And so that whole year in writing this book, God really brought right back to the forefront of my mind and my heart all that He had taught me about surrendering my will to His and trusting Him completely. And little did I know then that God was actually preparing me for the events to come. So, 2 years ago, on February 12th, my husband, Chris, and I ended up having an impromptu conversation with our son, Seth, who was 21 at the time. And Seth is this guy with big, lofty dreams, the type of dreams that many people never attain. But Seth was serious about it and determined to get it. And so, if he felt like his life wasn't moving forward towards reaching those goals and dreams, he would get very uptight. And February 12th was one of those nights. And so, as Chris and I were talking to him that night, the gist of what I tried to tell him was, you know, Seth, no matter how many hopes and dreams and goals and things you accomplish in this life, you will never truly be happy or fulfilled unless you are in God's will. So the very next night, February 13th of 2017, like Kathy said, our 21-year-old son Seth fell 25 feet through a roof onto concrete, sustaining a serious brain injury. He was in the ICU, on a ventilator, in an induced coma, fighting for his life. Never did Chris and I think we would be back in that position again. It was so surreal. I have to tell you though, I am so grateful for my husband Chris, because through everything we have been through, he has been a rock and a man of faith right by my side. And honestly, I don't know what I would ever do without him. But there we were. And the doctors told us that Seth could die, that the next 24 hours would be critical. So Father Jim came to the hospital once again for us. And he gave Seth the sacrament of the sick, and he gave him absolution from his sins. And then we began our vigil at his side, begging God for his life. The critical 24 hours, they actually stretched to several days. And during that time, Seth could have no stimulation at all, which meant that we sat in silence, we sat in darkness, and we sat in freezing cold because Seth had a dangerously high temperature. So while Chris and I and our other adult children were all there together, we were very much alone. Alone in our thoughts and alone in our prayers. And I don't think I have to tell any of you the kinds of things that go through your mind at a time like this. But what surprised me is that what also went through my mind were the words I had written in that book the whole year prior. Words about surrendering my will to God's. And I thought, oh no, God, no, I can't do this. And then the words that I had spoken to Seth just the night before, you will never truly be happy or fulfilled unless you're in God's will. Those words just played over and over in my head like a broken record. As the days went on, there was just one complication after another. And that's when Kathy began posting on Facebook. And I know many of you were part of Seth's Prayer Warriors, and honestly, we could never thank you enough for that. And so Kathy told you that vision that Amy Oatley had, and that was the night leading into day 6. So on the morning of day 6, when Chris and I woke up in Seth's hospital room where we had been night and day, I remember seeing that on Facebook and thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. But honestly, I couldn't grasp what it meant, and I kind of forgot about it because day 6 went on to be a very difficult day. There were more complications and in fact a huge setback. And at this point, both my husband and I just lost it. At one point, Chris just walked out of the room and he didn't tell me where he was going or when he would be back, and he had never done that before. But I remember when I saw him leave, all I could think was, yeah, that's all I wanted to do too. Like, I wanted to just get out of there and run. And so knowing that there were other family members in the room with Seth at the time, I left too. And I really didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. But I ended up in the hospital chapel. And there was no one in the chapel, so I knelt down and I just bent over and put my face to the floor and I just sobbed out loud. And I cried out, "No, God, please, no. You cannot take Seth from me now. I can't lose him." And I knew what I needed to do in that chapel. I knew that God was asking me to surrender Seth to him. But I didn't want to. I was so afraid to. Because I had surrendered my children before. And I knew that God's will and mine were often not the same. So I wrestled with God in that chapel, and I wrestled with myself until finally, before I left there, with tears streaming down my face and my fists clenched and my teeth clenched, I finally said, "Okay, God, your will, not mine, be done for Seth." And I have to tell you, as I prayed that, there was no rush of peace. There was no warm, fuzzy feeling. There was no sentiment at all. It was just a pure, conscious act of my will to God. And while it was pivotal, it wasn't done. I had to continually surrender Seth to Christ. And those of you who were here last night, Mother Mary Catherine gave out this surrender novena. This is the exact novena that I prayed at Seth's bedside day after day, sometimes by the minute. I know novenas are supposed to be once a day, but sometimes I pray them several. This novena is beautiful. Please pray it, because the words in it are so beautiful, and it really helped to bring me to a place of surrender. But I had to continually surrender, because the days to follow were some of the darkest. Because next we got the MRI report, and it was one of the worst reports we could have gotten. Seth had brain shearing, which is actually a shredding of the brain, as well as brain bleeds all throughout his brain and brain stem. At this point, they didn't know if Seth would ever wake up. And the doctors were no longer hopeful about what he would be like if he did. Up until this point, the doctors had been talking about when Seth got ready for recovery, he would eventually go to Mary Free Bed rehabilitation hospitals. It is one of the best acute rehab hospitals in the country, and it's literally 7 minutes from our home. But after they got the MRI report, they no longer thought Seth would be a candidate for a place like Mary Free Bed. They began talking to us about long-term, lower functioning rehab centers. This was one of the darkest times for us, because it became a reality that we may never get our son Seth back the way we knew him. So as Seth's brain swelling began to come down, the doctors were finally able to start cutting the sedation and then trying to see if Seth would wake up and if he would respond to us. I remember we just sat there hour after hour, day after day, and just watched Seth lay there unresponsive. And nobody could tell us if it was still the sedation in his system or the brain injury. It was truly terrifying. And you know, Seth never did just wake up all of a sudden one day. His waking up was really gradual. In fact, this is our idea of Seth awake. His eyes were open just like slits. He was dazed and he was silent. I remember sometimes I could look into his eyes and I knew Seth was in there. And other times, I could look into those very same eyes and there was just nothing. We were very, very blessed though, because a doctor from Mary Free Bed, Dr. Ho, came to evaluate Seth. And although Seth didn't respond to him whatsoever, based on a conversation he had with my husband, Chris, Dr. Ho decided to bring Seth to Mary Free Bed, even though his colleagues didn't think he should. But when Seth got to Mary Free Bed, he was in really bad shape. They had to use a mechanical lift to move him from the bed to the wheelchair. They had to get him a special wheelchair that would support his head because he couldn't even hold his own head up. He couldn't sit, he couldn't stand, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't eat, he couldn't swallow. He didn't know how to spell his name or how old he was or if he had graduated from high school. At every step in the process, we would look at our son and think, is this it for Seth? When Dr. Ho brought him to Mary Free Bed, He thought that he would have Seth there at least 10 weeks, not knowing what the outcome would be. But as the story goes, Seth left Mary free bed in only 4 weeks, and before he did, he was jogging down the hallways. Seth had a completely miraculous recovery. And not only was it a miracle that Seth recovered, but the speed at which he recovered was totally miraculous as well. I'll give you one example. One day in therapy, they had put 4 blocks on the table in front of him with the 4 letters that spelled his name. And they asked Seth if he could put those blocks in order to spell Seth. He looked at those blocks and just pushed them around the table like he had no clue what they meant. But then, only 2 days later, he was in speech therapy, and the therapist gave him a pen to see if he could write, and he began writing full adult sentences. Everybody was amazed by Seth's recovery. The therapist would tell us, "We don't even know how to plan for Seth. He literally changes every 24 hours. The nurses, they said, "We see miraculous things at Mary Free Bed all the time, but Seth is an anomaly." And Dr. Ho, I can't even tell you the number of times that he walked into Seth's room and he would just point at him and say, "You are incredible. Your MRI says that you should be dead or severely brain damaged." And he would just point up and say, "Somebody up there is making all the decisions and doing everything for us." I have never heard so many medical professionals use the word miracle. It was amazing. But as incredible as this is, there was something even more amazing. Seth had a spiritual miracle. Before Seth could even talk, that day that he began writing, one of the first things he wrote was this: "My God is good." Now let's just think about this for a minute. This is a 21-year-old guy who was out skateboarding with his friends and is now waking up completely helpless in a hospital. I don't think that's typically the first thing he's going to want to tell us. We knew right then and there that something had to have happened to Seth in that coma. And he was so peaceful. The doctors thought that Seth would wake up angry, because that's very, very typical for someone with a brain injury, especially a 21-year-old male named Seth. But anyways, but Seth had no anger at all. In fact, he was very, very obviously grateful for his life, and grateful for his family, and grateful for every bit of help that people gave him. Later, when Seth could talk, he told us that he had an out-of-body experience. That when he was in the ICU, he saw himself laying there hooked to all the machines. He knew that he was dying. He knew that he was in the presence of God. And he begged and he pleaded with God for his life. We realized then that Seth was not waking up from skateboarding with his friends. He had woken up from the presence of God. The miracle was Jesus. Not because the suffering was gone, because it wasn't. But Seth was peaceful because he had encountered Christ, and it showed. It was so obvious. Now this, as a mother, it was overwhelming. And to be honest with you, it was emotionally confusing. Because on one hand, my spirit was just burning within me. I mean, I could just feel it like it was on fire. Because my son is telling me that he was with God. And he's exuding this peace and this beauty like I had never seen in him before. But on the other hand, my heart was just broken. Because I was watching my active, athletic, full of life and hopes and dreams 21-year-old son in a wheelchair. I was watching his 23-year-old sister feeding him. I remember holding my 8-month-old grandson at the time, and I thought, oh my goodness, he has more control over his limbs than Seth does. It was scary because we didn't know what Seth's life on this earth was going to be like. Because at this point, he had little to no physical talents or abilities. And yet, spiritually, it was like we were seeing the beauty of a purified soul. And it was honestly the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. I knew that God was giving me a glimpse of heaven again. And guess what? Again, it was right in the middle of the suffering. Seth actually had many experiences with God while he was in the coma. But I just want to share with you a couple of the things that he told us. He told us that it actually would have been easier for him to die, but that he saw hundreds of people in his hospital room praying for him. So many people that it spilled out into 5 different rooms. He described to us exactly what Amy saw in her vision. And he told us that he felt that love and that he felt your prayers. And that your prayers are what gave him the strength to fight to come back to us. So that day 6, when I was in the hospital chapel sobbing and fighting with God over his plan for my son's life, little did I know that at that time, Seth was actually in God's presence. While I was doubting God, he was blessing and healing my son in ways far beyond anything I could have ever imagined or hoped for. And Seth went on and on and on to us about how amazing God's love is. And this was really something coming from Seth, because Seth, growing up, was always a rule follower. And as he grew, his faith became a bunch of do's and don'ts. And I used to tell him, Seth, you are missing out on the best part of your faith, the love relationship with God. And I don't think he ever really understood what I meant. So imagine my surprise when he comes out of this coma and he says to me, Mom, I know what it's like to be loved by God. And it's amazing. There is nothing, absolutely nothing on this earth that even comes close to comparing. And trust me, Seth is a guy that's attracted to everything on this earth. Like most of us, right? He even told me one day, he said, "This feels really weird to say, but I would rather be laying in this hospital bed with nothing but in God's will than be back at home and have everything back and not be in God's will." Chris and I, we were just in awe so much of the time. It was hard to even process what we were experiencing. But I remember thinking about all the times that I had doubted God throughout the process. And in many ways, I still was, because I was still scared for what kind of suffering Seth may have in this life. But then I realized that God had actually answered the number one greatest prayer of my heart for Seth and for all of my children. And that is that they would know God and love God and be in relationship with Him, surrendering their lives completely to God. It's the greatest prayer of my heart for myself and for my husband and for all of you. Because that is the only way we are going to make sense out of anything in this life. Because Jesus is the miracle. And He's the miracle right in the middle of our suffering. Because we all have it, lots of it. And no matter how hard we try, we will not escape it. But this miracle, Jesus, He's here for all of us. Our job is to surrender it, to place ourselves at the foot of the cross and unite our suffering to His. And what a perfect time right now as we get ready to enter the Triduum. But boy, do I know that that is way easier said than done. I've been so humbled and ashamed because as much as God has blessed me and shown me, as many times as He has given me these glimpses of heaven, I still am so weak. And honestly, I struggle every single day to surrender my will to His and to trust Him. But He just loves me so much. And He loves all of you so much that He just patiently waits for us. He waits, offering Himself to us daily. Because He is the miracle. He is the peace that surpasses all understanding. And He will always, always be right here with us. Thank you. So, my husband and I, as I said, we've been through a lot. And like I said earlier, I don't know what I would do without him. He's an incredible man, and so it is my privilege and my honor now to introduce him to you. So please welcome with me my husband, Chris.
I'm the one that gets to follow my wife. She's a gifted speaker. You get me. Just really quickly, I was raised a cradle Catholic in Wichita, Kansas. I'm not from this area. And I went to Mass every week, not because I was a holy kid or a devout kid. It's because I had a very devout and holy mom that dragged me and my sisters kicking and screaming to CCD and Mass every Sunday. Meanwhile, my dad, he slept in his warm bed in the morning, and that's where we wanted to be. But since then, my dad, about 8th grade, really kind of came into his faith, and he became a good man and devoted Catholic. And it wasn't until I was about 20 years old that I made a recommitment to living my Catholic faith. I had been living pretty much a typical college lifestyle the year before, so I went to Mass maybe once that year. And after a while, I just got shallow and I wanted more. So I recommitted to my Catholic faith. I went to receive communion weekly and receive the sacraments regularly. Also about this time, I started a relationship with our Blessed Mother. It was such a natural relationship because I had a really good example in my mom. So when I began to pray the rosary regularly, I felt her presence. And the thing about the rosary is that, for me, it's my consolation when I'm lonely, and it's my strength when I'm in trouble, and I'm afraid, or whatever. I feel the presence, and I feel her mantle of protection. So fast forward to the night of Seth's injury. I'm skipping all the babies because she did a great job. I can't do that. So, to the night of Seth's injury, the doctors told us that it was pretty severe. The fact that he could probably die from this. And when we went into the ICU room, and everyone had left, the doctors had left, Seth was on sedation, he was in a medically induced coma. They had leads, everything coming out of him. I think I counted 18 or 20 of them at one point. It was such a conglomeration of things coming out. The nurses were digging to get around him and check on him. And there was a point where everyone left. It was Chris and I in the room. We were both together there, but like she said before, we were separate in our thoughts. We couldn't talk to each other. We were not allowed to talk because they didn't want any brain activity. It was that bad. And they told us he could die from this. So like with any parent, I think the first thing you think of is, my son could die. I got to pray for him, and I'm going to pray nonstop. So I grabbed my rosary, and I began praying it at the foot of his bed. And I paced all the way down. I'm not forgetting you people over here. I prayed nonstop at the foot of his bed, and I would pray my rosaries, and I'd keep pacing, and I was trying to find a rhythm, whether it be in the decades and stuff. I prayed all night long, because we didn't know how much time we were going to have with Seth. And so I prayed and prayed, bead, rosary after rosary, all night long. And it was my strength. She got me through it. I felt her compassion. I felt her strength. And her intercession. We were praying together. Day 6. That's kind of a big one for us. Day 6 in the ICU was when Seth was going to take a giant step forward in his recovery process. He was supposed to get his tracheostomy. Now, this has been the second time, Chris didn't say this, but this is the second time they were going to attempt to have his tracheostomy put in. And they told us that if he gets his tracheostomy in, it was going to be a lot better in his recovery. So we were all getting excited for it. So we've been waiting in the waiting room for about an hour, and the doctor told us it'd be about an hour in his recovery. And the doctor came out, and she's like, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to do the tracheostomy. And when you're taking a big step forward, you're kind of ready for it, and all of a sudden you have to take 10 steps back. That's what it felt like. I felt like I got sucker punched. And she said on top of it, he had developed pneumonia, another way. walking back to the ICU room, I couldn't breathe. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. And like Chris said before, she saw something in me. And I turned around and I walked out of the room. I'm not proud of it. I've been trying to be so strong for the family. But I got in the room and I saw my kids there, and I saw Seth was there and my wife. I couldn't do it. I didn't have anything to give them. So I turned around and I walked out of that ICU room without telling anybody. I walked out down to the elevator. I got off the elevator. I walked out of the hospital. Nobody knew where I went. I didn't even know where I was going. I just had to get away. And I walked about 2 blocks down the road, and there was a park. And I remember sitting there at the park. And I was confused. I was like, Lord, we've been praying nonstop. What are we supposed to do? I don't know what to do next. I don't know what's going on. I was confused. I was angry. Every emotion you can think of, that's what I was feeling. But thankfully, for some reason, I remember to reach in my pocket. And my rosary was there. The rosary, like I said before, is my consolation when I'm lonely. And it's my strength in times of trouble. And believe me, it was trouble. I could look back up at the hospital and I could see the rooms that they were probably in. And I couldn't give them what I needed to give them. I was trying to be strong. So I prayed the rosary. When at the end of the rosary, I got my strength back. And I went back up to that room. And I was there for my family. Now, all of us go through what we call an Abraham moment. And my wife's Abraham moment was the time of what we just went through, day 6. That was her Abraham moment. Well, my Abraham moment's a little bit different. And before I go into that, I want to talk to you about Genesis 22, where it is about Abraham. And in Scripture it says that the Lord put Abraham to the test, and we all know that passage or the story where the Lord says, Abraham. And you know what Abraham's response is? I never really noticed it until I started studying it. You know what he says? He says, ready. Ready. I mean, how many of you, when you're praying and you feel God calling you or talking to you, do we ever say ready? He was ready no matter what. He had incredible faith. And then it gets better, because then the Lord says, I want you to take your only son, who you've been waiting so long for, and I wanted you to offer him up as a holocaust. I don't know about you. You're going to find a little later. I'm not Abraham. But that was Abraham. He just immediately did it. And we know the story. He goes up to the mount. He builds the altar. He puts his son on the altar. He takes out his knife, and he's about ready to plunge his dagger into his son's heart. But you know what the thing is upon reading it later on, it came to me, is that the reason why he could do all that, we can sometimes wonder, how could he do that? It's because he knew that God had promised that Isaac was going to be the father. He was going to lead nations. So he trusted God. He knew that he had something better. And he just knew, beyond a doubt, Lord's not going to harm him. He knew it. But he went through the whole motion. And right as he's getting that knife up there, the messenger of the Lord says, Abraham, yes, Lord, do not harm the boy. God sees how devoted you are to him, and he's pleased with your sacrifice. And so again, he offers up, the ram in the thicket, and he offers up that holocaust. My Abraham moment was a couple days after they took Seth off sedation. They had already told us the MRI report, and it was the worst case scenario. It was our worst fear. And the thing about Google is you can look it up, and you can see a lot of things that almost become too knowledgeable. Well, that was us. We knew all about TBI and brain shearing, and it was bad. And so when they said that, I said, it's going to be this bad because God's going to reveal his glory and stuff. And this is like our peaks and valleys. Sometimes you're really up there, and sometimes you're really low. That was my peak. I was like I was on board. I knew that God was doing. One day, this was a couple days after they took him off sedation, Seth was in his bed. He wasn't showing any purposeful movement. He was laying there not moving, and Chris and I, like she said before, said, we weren't sure what was happening. And so all these little doubts and things start creeping in your mind. You're trying to, rebuke it, but they still come anyway. And I had a friend earlier in that day sent me a text and goes, "Hey Chris, is there anything I can do for you? Can I pray for you? Whatever." And I had the text and I showed it to my wife a couple of days ago because I found it. And it said, "Tom, I feel like my fear is overcoming me. I'm afraid of what might happen. I don't know if I can do this. My faith knees are buckling. I don't know how much more I can stand. Please pray for me." Later on that night, Chris and I took shifts. One night we'd be at home, getting showered up, being with our younger kids, and the other one would be at the hospital. We never left Seth's sides, the older kids and Chris and I. So we always were on a vigil of some sort. That one night, after I had that text, I get home, and my oldest son and his wife are there, and they had been staying with our family. And he goes, "Dad, how are you doing?" All I know is that I had been really trying to be strong for my family. That's kind of why I left that hospital, because I was starting to break a little. And the way he said it, Michael is such a sincere guy. Boy, I'm so thankful I got an older son. My oldest son is like him. He's a beautiful guy. I mean, he just got a great heart. Anyway, the way he said it was so sincere, like, "Dad, how you doing?" And it was like an arrow, and it shaped my armor. And I remember sitting there in the living room, and him and his wife were there, and I said, tears are starting to come down. And I go, what if this is the best it gets? Seth's supposed to be waking up, and there's no movement. We don't know if he's going to be in a wheelchair his whole life. I'm really afraid for him. Seth was our best athlete in the family. He was strong. And in that room, he couldn't move, couldn't do anything. I said, what if he never walks again? What if he never talks again? And I got up and I moved over to Seth, or to my son Michael, and I gave him a big hug. And I said, I'm so afraid for him. I said, he has so many hopes and dreams, and he may never get to live those. He may never get to experience any of it. And all those feelings that I had, those doubts, they started just pouring out, and I started bawling. As I was talking to one of my younger kids, he's like, I don't think I've ever seen you bawl. But I was bawling. I couldn't contain it anymore. I said, Michael, I said, I know what God wants. He wants me to surrender Seth to him. And like Chris said, I surrendered 4 babies to him. I don't think I can surrender Seth to him. And it's because I felt if I let go, he might take him. And I didn't want to let go of him. And so as soon as I said it, I knew what my heart was going to say. And it was yes. As soon as I said it, I said, but Michael, I know I'm going to say yes. That's what God wants, and I know I got to do what he wants. I got to surrender it, but it's so hard. I'm so afraid where it's going. But that night was my Abraham moment. And I surrendered Seth to God's will and to his purpose. Now this talk is all about making sense out of suffering. And Chris did a great job of framing it and talking about it. And I wanted to go a little bit in a different way. There's quite a few men in here. And I know, looking back at trying to make sense out of suffering, God made us men for 3 things. He made us to be protectors, providers, and spiritual heads of our family. And society's great about talking about we must and we need to be in control. You need to have that pride, and nobody's going to stomp on it. Nobody's going to tell us what to do. It's all about choice, right? But God wants us to be the spiritual heads of our family. He wants us to show our kids and lead our families to heaven. And I don't think they don't ever talk about that. They talk about being the protector and provider, and that's what most of us do best. At least that's what I took pride in. When we were going through with the kids, I put my identity in what I did, what I worked, how much I made. And when we were going through the kids, we didn't make a lot of money. I didn't have a great title. And so I really struggled with my purpose. And it wasn't until I let go and I surrendered everything and gave God control. And I said, Lord, I just want to do what you want me to do. That he could form me into the man that he wanted me to be. God wants us completely. He wants us then to share our faith with our family. Right? The night before Seth had his accident, Chris and I had that talk with him, and it was an impromptu talk. And at one point I told him, I said, you know, in Scripture, Mark 8:36, it says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And I told Seth that because he was trying to grab, what do I get to? It's stuff that we've said before, but we were trying to reiterate what we said. And now tonight I want to say, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his family and his soul? Man, God wants to see our faith in action. We need it more than ever. And I want to make a challenge to all the men here tonight, myself included. Believe me, I need to hear this as much as anybody. We need to share our faith with our families. And we need to give control, complete control to Christ, our families, and ourselves. You can only have one Savior in your family, and it has to be Jesus. If we can't share our faith and we can't give control to God and surrender that to Him, how are your kids going to be able to do it when it comes their time? Because we all know, not everyone, everyone knows that we go through the trials. You're going to go through the trials. They're going to come, no matter what. You have to be the models. You have to model that to them. They need to see it because they need to make sense out of their own suffering when it comes. So I challenge you to do that. Now, when I think back at all the things that I went through, the ups and downs, when we were in that room, in the ICU room, I was praying nonstop for Seth. I was praying that God would save his life because I was afraid he was going to die. The thing I didn't know is that Jesus was with him in that coma. And Seth's going to share a little bit about that later. He was with him in that coma, and he was saving his soul. And I was worried about saving his life. God wants all of us, right? He wants all of us, and we have to give that to him. And I tell my family this all the time. It's like we're looking down a hallway. When you look down a hallway, it's easy to live your faith because you see everything laid out in front of you. You can see it all. Oh yeah, okay, that's what you want. Okay, I got it. It's when we come to the end of the hallway and it turns a corner. All of a sudden we get really reluctant. We're afraid to do any more because, I don't know about you, I'm afraid of what's around the corner sometimes. And all I can tell you, it's like when Chris had the Divine Chaplet, had the Jesus up there. When it comes to those times, just tell yourself, Jesus, I trust in you. Because the doubts are going to come. And you got to rebuke it through all of it. Even the doctors saying some of the things they say, believing it's not what you want to hear, rebuke it. Say, Jesus, I trust in you. You got the wheel. I just want to take a real quick second here. You're going to hear a little bit about Seth's story tonight. And we have books out here that Chris, about her book she wrote. We're going to sell that. And then we also have some what do you call it? Bookmarks, thank you. A bookmark. And it tells a little bit about Seth. But the one thing on the back of it is that we have a local Hollywood director who was really interested in doing a movie about Seth and about what we went through. And we really think that we can touch a lot of lives. We need to touch a lot of lives. We see what the climate is right now. If you're one of those people who have means, or who knows someone who has means, and you think that maybe you can reach out to them, we have a website that you can go to, and you can get in touch with them. We're looking for people to be benefactors, to help us to fundraise, do things like that, to get the message out. If you can help us in any way, please go to the website or talk to us at the table when we're out there tonight. So, the best part for me is I get to introduce my son. With much gratitude, of course, and thankfulness to God for being faithful to us and being so good to us. I get to introduce my son, Seth. He is a young man of courage and conviction, and God is using him in a special way to spread his message of hope and love. And believe me, it's not easy for a man his age to come up and try to share with people in high school, young adults. He comes against a lot of resistance, but he's adamant in his faith. And the nice thing is that Seth's going to share with you a little bit about what it was like for him and what he went through with Jesus. When we couldn't see around the corner, he was experiencing it in a deep and miraculous way. So if you would, please welcome my son Seth to the stage.
Sorry, yeah, I spilled my drink. I didn't ruin everything. I almost died, and I'll spill my drink. It's crazy to think that's me. Especially when just 1 week earlier. This is awesome. Since I was about 16. But since I was about 16, music has been my life. I was going to be one of the biggest names in music. I wanted it more than anything, and I was determined to get it. And with that, I kind of got sucked into the whole party life, like it's all about me. Without even really realizing it. And then this accident happened. And honestly, it probably saved my soul. February 13th, I was downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan, is where we lived. I was location scouting with some friends for my next music video. As the sun was setting, me and a friend climbed up on a roof to grab a glimpse. But as we were climbing back down, I made one jump from one landing down to another when the roof just collapsed underneath me in impact. I fell 2 stories to concrete, was unconscious immediately, and wasn't breathing.
We jumped the roof, literally fell.
My friends freaking out called 911. The ambulance came and resuscitated me and then rushed me to the hospital. I was in a medically induced coma for 2.5 weeks. My parents asked the doctors if I could die from this, and they said yes. Yes, he could. You see, I had brain shear and I was shredding the brain. The doctors didn't even know if I'd ever wake up from the coma. Spoiler alert. I did. Gotcha. But I was different. I couldn't walk. I couldn't even sit up on my own. I couldn't eat, couldn't swallow, couldn't talk. The list goes on. I was completely dependent on other people. I was a 21-year-old, not even able to go to the bathroom on my own. You see, all this has taught me so much. Things I don't know if I would have learned if this didn't happen. Because you see, something happened when I was in the coma. I saw my body laying there, hooked up to all the machines, and I was with God. I felt all the prayers being said for me. Our prayers do so much more than you could ever know. And I felt God's love like nothing I had ever experienced before. And I also felt when people wouldn't pray. When they wouldn't take just 2 seconds. Like they're too tired or you don't want to pray. It hurt so bad. And I think it hurt so bad because I knew I was one of those people. So easy to say, oh yeah, I'll pray for him. Oh yeah, I'll pray for you. And then you just forget. And it's not even that you try and do it on purpose. When I was in the coma, I had many spiritual experiences. At one point, I went to a baseball field where there was an injured player. And Jesus just knelt down next to him and cried for him. See, God never makes bad things happen to us. He cries with us for our pain. He never desires for us to hurt. A lot of people have asked me if I've ever been mad at God for this. Like, why me, God? Like, why did I have to go through this? So 1 in a million. Like, why me? But I mean, God didn't make me get up on that roof. God didn't make the guy who made the roof make it all weak and pathetic. I see it as, when I fell through that roof that night, is God standing over me saying, oh, Seth, what have you done? Well, hold on to me and we'll get through this together. See, God is always offering his strength to us. We just have to accept it. Another experience I had was I was in a long line. Longer than I've ever seen. It does not even make sense how long this line was. In an instant, I saw all the times I could have chosen God whether I did or didn't. I felt like I didn't deserve heaven. It hurts so bad to feel the weight of my own sin. I cannot even imagine what Christ must have felt as he hung on the cross and took on the weight of all of our sins. When I was in the line, it was moving so fast. God wasn't up there like, let's see here. Heaven or hell? I don't know. What do you think? No, he knew. Based on how you lived your life. If you want to go to heaven, live like it. We need to choose God now in this life. If there's anything you want to do or change, do it now. Change it right now. You may never get another chance. And I know it's hard. This life seems so attractive, but it's not, especially when we see the other side. Now, that doesn't mean we won't have temptation. That's why we have to be so careful of who we surround ourselves with. Are they leading us closer to Christ or farther away? You know, one thing my mom has always told me is, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. We never just kind of stay where we're at. That's kind of like personal training. I'm a personal trainer now. And it's like, if someone comes in the gym and they want to get bigger arms, or let's just take me for example. If I go in the gym and I want some bigger arms, like, I can't just go in and when I'm doing curls, curl the same amount of weight for the same amount of reps. Then the next time I go into the gym, curl the same amount of weight for the same amount of reps. And the same thing for the next time and the next time. They won't grow. I've given them no reason to. So what are you doing in your life? You know, how are you pushing yourself to know Christ more and to love Christ more? Because that relationship isn't just going to grow by itself. You need to give it some reason to change, to grow. When I was in the hospital, in a wheelchair, unable to walk or eat normally, I told my parents it was a blessing. I told them the gifts that God gives are greater than anything we could ever imagine. And what God let me see and experience was more amazing than anything I'd ever seen or experienced in my life. The spiritual realm is so close. If you guys could see with your spiritual realm right now, or see with your spiritual eyes, you would see that this room is packed more than it already is. We are never alone. You are never alone. when you pray like God is right next to you. Because He is. He's right here, right now. You know, it's something I'm always kind of reminded of when I find myself in the Adoration Chapel at like 2 in the morning, you know, on my knees, begging God, praying, in tears. Is when I was in my coma, God said, see all these people here praying to me because you're hurt and they need something? He said, but I'm here always. Man, how true is that? You know, I don't find myself in the chapel at 2 in the morning thanking Him for things. I'm always there at 2 in the morning sobbing, crying, and Lord, help me with this, give me this. And yeah, sure, we're supposed to always pray. But we need to be praying and thanking Him even more. And praying more even when life is perfect. I mean, I feel like that's when we should be praying the most. Everything I experienced was so amazing, but I knew God had a mission for me. From the moment I was awake, I was frantic about telling my parents something. When I had learned how to talk and could talk, I told my parents what I had experienced while I was in the coma. And man, you couldn't shut me up about it. My mom journaled everything. And man, am I glad she did. Because if I'm 100% honest with you guys, I don't remember most of it. And that's probably been the hardest part about this whole thing. It's like, for an instinct, God let me see with my spiritual eyes and feel with my spiritual senses. But God called me back to the physical realm here on earth. You see, faith is not just believing what you see. That's why it's called faith. I may not remember all the spiritual experiences I had, but I can feel the effects of them every day. A lot of people have called my accident a tragedy, but it has truly been a blessing. Now, that doesn't mean it hasn't been hard. This has been the hardest thing I've ever been through. My healing was undeniably a miracle, but I've still had to go through every step. It wasn't like I just woke up and everything was better. This next, yeah, I'll just show you that. This next video is when they're actually, the first time they were able to get me up and headed in the right direction of walking.
Nice job, Seth.
I'm gonna get in trouble later and say, why do you let me think you're doing that? Let's start with the right leg. Take us down here. Good job. Now step with this leg. Get out. Up. Up. Okay. Big step with this leg.
Look at that. Look at that, Seth.
Stand up tall.
Dad.
There.
Good job.
Gonna step with this leg. Get out. You got it. Yeah, right there. Go with that. Kick, kick, kick. Good.
Get the shoulders back.
I'll watch your feet. Look up tall, okay? Jump up right a little more. Big step. Kick, kick, kick all the way through. Ooh. That's a hard kick. Just press over. There you go.
I've had to rediscover who I am. It's been kind of weird. Things that I used to like, I don't really care for. Things I didn't really care for, I kind of like. But one thing that's probably been the hardest is that my whole life changed in an instant. 1 second I was cool, popular, athletic, feeling like I was at the top of my game. And in the next second, I was in the hospital fighting for my life, and then became the helpless guy in a wheelchair. The type of guy I would have gotten frustrated and impatient with before. I realized that I am really nothing without God. Everything that I am or can do is really a gift from God. That my life should be to glorify Him, not myself. The first time I got on social media after my accident, was like culture shock. Going from the spiritual realm to that. It was shocking how everything was all about me, look at me. And I've seen so much how people put their self-worth in it. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, I've struggled with it. It's something I always have to keep in check. But this accident has completely changed my life. I'm not a perfect person, but I'm committed to my faith and striving to grow closer to Christ every day. This next video I'm going to show you is my music video, my song, Check in the Bank. The first verse I wrote before my accident, and the second verse I wrote after. It's the story of the prodigal son, very much like my story. And in the video you'll see how my dad is running to me. Just like our Father in heaven is always pursuing us and always running for us. But we always seem to be the one who turns away. So, check in the bank. started to forget the spiritual experiences I had. I kept telling my parents, don't ever let me forget this. But one day, God showed me very clearly where He would always be present to me, and where He'd always be present to all of us. The Eucharist. The very first time I received the Eucharist after my accident, the minute it touched my tongue, I was instantly back with God, just exactly like when I was in my coma. Although we cannot see Him, He is always present to us in the Eucharist. But I will never forget this time in my life. It's been full of struggle. But the peace and the love that God has awaiting all of us is worth any struggle. I would go back to laying in the hospital bed, not being able to do anything, just to feel that love again. So thank you.